No one expected what was about to happen when Jasmine Crockett tried to humiliate Karoline Leavitt live on national television, but they had no idea what was coming next. The stage was set under the unforgiving glow of studio lights, a high-stakes, political debate on primetime cable, with millions watching live and millions more ready to clip every word on social media. The audience was electric, a mix of loyal supporters, curious independents, and journalists hungry for controversy. One podium stood Karoline Leavitt, young, sharp, and constantly underestimated. With the calm composure of someone who's had to fight twice as hard to earn half the respect, Karoline carried not just her reputation, but the weight of every conservative woman dismissed as just a pretty face. She wasn't here for applause, she was here for truth. Opposite her was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, bold, unapologetic, and infamous for her no-holds-barred clapbacks. Backed by a legion of social media fans and armed with viral one-liners, Jasmine came ready to dominate, confident this would be just another political takedown. The topic? Media bias, political identity, and the role of women in shaping America's future. And the tension? Thick enough to slice with a knife. The moderator had barely finished the opening question, something about representation and truth in modern media, when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her tone already dripping with sarcasm. Before we pretend this is a balanced discussion, can we all just acknowledge the obvious? I mean, Karoline Leavitt representing truth. That's rich. Laughter from her side of the audience. Jasmine didn't wait. You worked in the Trump White House, right? So you're the expert on honesty now. Should we roll the tape on how that administration defined alternative facts? She chuckled to herself, shaking her head, basking in the smug approval of the crowd. Cameras caught a few audience members nodding along. Others started pulling out phones, sensing this might go viral fast. Jasmine leaned in further, her voice rising for effect. Look, I don't care how well you read the teleprompter, Karoline. People like you aren't about truth. You're about loyalty to power, not principle. Karoline didn't flinch. She sat still, hands clasped, her posture perfect. Eyes locked, controlled. Jasmine smirked and pushed harder. You're not here to uplift women. You're here to look pretty, throw red meat to the far right, and distract people from the fact that the party you worship tried to erase an entire election. The crowd gasped. A few scattered claps. One person whistled. The moderator hesitated, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Karoline took a breath. Then she smiled, not out of amusement, but out of certainty. And when she spoke, her voice cut, through the noise like a blade through fog. Congresswoman Crockett, I know it's tempting to reduce me to a stereotype, to pretend I'm just a mouthpiece or a mannequin. But unlike many in Washington, I didn't come here to win applause. I came here to confront a lie. The room went still. Jasmine blinked, thrown by the composure. You say I'm not about truth, but here's the truth. I served in the White House as one of the youngest women in history to hold my role. I didn't get there by being loud. I got there by being effective, something this town desperately needs more of. A low murmur began in the audience. Karoline leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. You want to talk about loyalty? I'm loyal to the millions of Americans who wake up every day, work 2 jobs, raise families, and feel like this government has forgotten them. I didn't come here for power. I came here because they have none. The mood shifted. Some of Jasmine's supporters, the ones who were smirking moments ago, looked suddenly uncomfortable. A few murmurs of agreement started to bubble from unexpected corners of the crowd. Jasmine tried to laugh it off. Oh, please, don't act like you're the voice of the people. You're part of a media machine built on outrage and division. Karoline paused, then delivered the line that began shifting the entire room. Funny, that's exactly what they say about you. Small gasps. Then a few claps. A ripple. The tide was turning. She continued. If you truly cared about unity, Congresswoman, maybe you'd spend less time rehearsing zingers and more time reading the legislation you vote on. Because while you're out chasing retweets, real Americans are drowning under the weight of the policies you help push. The camera caught a college student in the front row nodding. Someone near the back whispered, Damn! Jasmine blinked. She hadn't expected Karoline to come out this fast, and definitely not this sharp. She reached for her water. A delay. Tactic. My Karoline didn't stop. Let me be clear. I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to be palatable to coastal media elites. I'm here because millions of young women, especially conservative ones, are told every single day that they're not allowed to speak, that they'll be mocked, dismissed, silenced. I'm standing here so they know they don't have to sit down. Boom. The audience reaction was different this time. No polite claps. This was applause. Long, loud, sustained. Even some in Jasmine's section seemed caught off guard. Cameras cut to social media feeds lighting up in real time. That Leavitt comeback was surgical. Sana Karoline claps back. Wait, she's cooking far for Chilmi Siog Crockett vs Leavitt. Jasmine came for a slap. Karoline brought a scalpel. Back at the podium, Jasmine's smile was tight now, no longer confident, defensive, and Karoline, she just straightened her blazer, turned toward the audience and waited for the next question. But that was just the beginning. What happened next changed everything. The applause from Karoline's clapback was still echoing through the studio when Jasmine Crockett struck again. This time, her voice sharper, her tone colder. She was rattled and dangerous. You know what's funny, Karoline? She began, eyes narrowed, voice rising for the cameras. You sit there talking about forgotten Americans, as if you actually understand struggle. As if you've ever had to fight for anything real. Gasps from the front row. A murmur began, low, uneasy. Jasmine wasn't done. She stepped out from behind her podium, owning the stage like it was a courtroom. Her heels echoed with every step. You grew up in New Hampshire, private schools, political internships, handpicked by the Trump machine before you were even old enough to rent a car. She smirked, letting that line settle. You talk like you're a fighter for the people, but you've never lived paycheck to paycheck. You've never sat across from a landlord wondering if you can afford next month. Don't you dare pretend to speak for the poor when you've never tasted desperation. A few audience members clapped. Others looked uncomfortable. The energy was shifting again, but this time, not cleanly. Karoline remained motionless, jaw set, but her eyes locked on Jasmine with an intensity that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd been told she didn't belong. Jasmine went further. You're not a voice. You're a ventriloquist's puppet, repeating whatever gets you booked on Fox News. You want to be seen as a woman of substance? Then act like one. Stop hiding behind talking points and start being honest about who you are and who you're not. Silence. The room held its breath. And then Karoline stepped forward, slow, measured, no flash, no fury, just presence. Congresswoman, she said, I don't need to audition for authenticity. I live it. The words were quiet, almost too quiet. But somehow that made them louder. You don't know me, and frankly, your attempt to shame me for the circumstances of my birth is the most anti-woman, anti-progressive thing I've heard tonight. Isn't your party supposed to uplift women regardless of their background? Jasmine's smile faltered. She hadn't expected this reversal. Not that fast. Yes, I grew up in New Hampshire. Yes, I worked hard, and I earned opportunities. But I also watched my father work overtime to keep the lights on. I saw my mother skip meals so we could eat. So don't you dare tell me I haven't tasted struggle. Whispers spread through the crowd. Several heads turned. A few jaws dropped. Karoline's voice rose now, not in anger, but in clarity. You want to talk about privilege. You stand on a national platform elected by the people, and you use your time not to solve problems, but to perform. You attack women like me because you can't stand the idea that someone outside your political tribe might actually care, might actually lead. That's not empowerment, that's elitism, wrapped in activism. Boom! Gasps. Two audience. Members audibly said, Whoa. One guy in the back actually stood up, hand over his mouth like he'd just watched someone get dunked on in slow motion. Jasmine opened her mouth to respond, but Karoline wasn't done. You accuse me of being a puppet, but here's what I know. I've written my speeches, I've fought my battles, and I've stood on more debate stages than most people twice my age, not because someone handed it to me, but because I refused. To sit down. Karoline turned slightly to the audience. And while we're being honest, let's admit something. Every woman who dares to be conservative in this industry is told she's a traitor, a fraud, or a puppet. Why? Because we break the mold, and that terrifies the establishment. So if speaking my truth unapologetically makes me a threat, then good. Let them be threatened. Boom! Mic drop energy. But she hadn't even raised her voice. The audience was cracking now, visibly shifting. Even the moderator looked stunned. Social media exploded again. She's not just defending herself, she's defending every woman told to shut up. Karoline vs. Jasmine. I didn't expect this to be that deep. Leavitt is making a point that hits. Uncomfortable truths. Crockett brought fire, but Karoline just brought a flamethrower. Jasmine tried to retake the stage, voice louder now, words coming faster. You're not above criticism just because you speak softly, Karoline. Don't play the victim. If you want to sit at the grown-up table, expect to be challenged, Karoline. Turned back, her voice low and firm. Challenge me with ideas, not insults. The room fell silent again. And then applause, slow, then faster, then louder. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to make it undeniable. Something had shifted. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. But the next move from Jasmine would be her biggest mistake yet. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the moderator shuffled his notes, preparing to pivot topics. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't ready to move on. She had one last play. One final hand she was certain would end Karoline Leavitt's momentum and humiliate her in front of millions. Before we move on, Jasmine said, her voice dripping, with faux civility, I'd love to test Karoline's knowledge on the very policies she pretends to champion. Karoline's eyes narrowed. The crowd tensed. Even the moderator looked unsure. By all means, Karoline said, folding her hands calmly. Let's have it. Jasmine walked over to the edge of the stage, a smug grin forming. Let's talk. Section 230, she announced, loud enough to shake the rafters. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Section 230. That was legislative deep water, obscure, technical, and often misunderstood even by lawmakers themselves. Jasmine continued, pacing like a prosecutor. You conservatives love yelling about big tech and censorship, but do you even understand how the law works? So here's the challenge, Karoline. Explain Section 230, specifically the Good Samaritan Clause, and how repealing it would impact content moderation platforms under current FCC interpretations. And do it without talking in slogans. A collective ooh erupted from the audience. Phones were raised, live streams spiked, Twitter hashtags started trending instantly. To Karoline cornered Jan Section 20 D Smackdown, Crockett checkmate Jasmine, stood tall, arms folded, convinced she'd delivered a fatal blow. The crowd waited. Even the moderator leaned in. Karoline blinked once, twice, and then she smiled. Great question, she said, calm and precise. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act protects online platforms from being held liable for user-generated content. That means if someone posts something defamatory on Twitter, you can't sue Twitter, you sue the individual. The Good Samaritan Clause gives platforms the right to moderate content in good faith without being labeled publishers. She paused for effect. But repealing 230 without a replacement would either lead to total censorship, because companies would over-moderate to avoid liability, or no moderation at all because they'd shut down platforms entirely out of fear, which ironically would hurt the very voices your party claims to protect. Boom. Stunned silence. A few heads turned in disbelief, but Karoline wasn't finished. And regarding the FCC, they don't actually enforce Section 230. It's not under their direct jurisdiction. So unless Congress grants them new authority, which would require a separate legislative act, they can't reinterpret it at will. That's legal overreach. Jasmine blinked. Her mouth opened slightly. She wasn't expecting that. And, just to be clear, Karoline added, the real issue isn't whether we repeal Section 230. It's whether we update it to reflect today's platforms, which have evolved from neutral bulletin boards to algorithmic gatekeepers. The audience gasped. A group of law students in the second row started clapping. One of them shouted, "She ate that up!" another whispered, loud enough to be heard by the cameras. Crockett just played chess with a woman who brought the board. Jasmine tried to recover. Well then, if you know so much, maybe you'd like to tell us how your side plans to regulate algorithms without infringing on the First Amendment. Karoline didn't flinch. Easy. We regulate transparency, not content. Force platforms to reveal how they amplify certain posts without controlling what users can say. It's not about policing speech. It's about accountability. Something your side used to care about before it became politically inconvenient. That hit hard. Audience. Gasps, nods, a smattering of applause. The moderator cleared his throat, eyes wide. I think Ms. Leavitt just gave a clearer explanation than most sitting members of Congress. Jasmine tried to pivot. That's great in theory, but Karoline cut in sharply but without venom. No, what's great is that for once we're not letting cheap shots replace real policy. You tried to embarrass me with legal trivia, and now the audience knows who really does their homework. The crowd erupted, this time with full applause. Even some of Jasmine's supporters couldn't help but nod. Twitter clips of the moment were already exploding across platforms. She just reversed a policy trap in real time. Karoline Leavitt, not just talking points, she's got policy chops. Fast clapback queen. Jasmine brought a trick question. Karoline brought constitutional clarity. Game over. And just when everyone thought it was over, Karoline dropped a final bombshell. One last thing, she said, cool as ice. You know how I learned all that about Section 230? Because last year I helped draft a reform proposal. Won your Kai. Office declined to co-sponsor. Dead silence. A visible ripple of shock surged through the studio. Jasmine turned pale. The moderator's eyebrows shot up. Someone in the back of the room let out an audible, stunned, "What?" Jasmine Crockett's face didn't hide it well. Her eyes flickered toward the moderator, her notes, then the crowd, each glance more frantic than the last. The Section 230 trap had backfired. Badly. What was supposed to be her mic drop moment had turned into an accidental masterclass, delivered by her opponent, and the audience knew it. A low, persistent murmur pulsed through the room like static. Phones were lighting up, tweets were flying, TikToks were already being cut from live streams. Even the moderator leaned back, sensing something had shifted, but Jasmine wasn't done. Let's not waste too much time on legal semantics, she snapped, trying to recapture control. Real Americans don't care about internet law, they care about leadership. The pivot was clumsy, obvious, desperate. Karoline didn't move. She simply cocked an eyebrow. Jasmine continued. Let's talk about people, Karoline. While you were out here rehearsing constitutional trivia, families are being evicted, black communities are underfunded, and MAGA extremists are trying to rewrite history. Maybe you should spend less time memorizing Section 230 and more time understanding systemic injustice. She threw her hands up, gesturing toward the audience like a preacher mid-sermon. That's the real issue. A few scattered claps came from the far left corner of the audience, likely staffers. But the room didn't erupt the way she expected. Instead, they looked conflicted. Karoline nodded slowly. Then she stepped forward, just one step. Enough to command space, without posturing. You want to talk about leadership? Let's talk about truth. Her voice dropped just slightly, not louder, but heavier. What you just did, Congresswoman, is the oldest political trick in the book. You lost a debate, so you tried to change the subject. You couldn't answer the question, so you attacked my priorities. You couldn't defend your record, so you tried to question my heart. But leadership isn't about yelling the loudest, it's about being the most honest, even when it's inconvenient. The audience froze. Karoline turned, not to Jasmine, but to the crowd, to them. Yes, Americans are hurting. Yes, injustice exists. And yes, it's our duty to fix it. But you don't fix a broken system by using identity as a shield from accountability. A few gasps. Heads started to nod. You fix it by doing your homework, showing up prepared, and telling people the truth, even when it doesn't fit a hashtag. Now she looked directly at Jasmine. I didn't come here to win a shouting match. I came to represent Americans who are sick of watching their so-called leaders hide behind slogans while dodging real issues. You want to talk about eviction rates? Great, let's pull the numbers. But don't pretend I don't care because I'm young, conservative, or white. That's not activism, that's projection. Boom, the crowd, once divided, was turning. You could see it in their faces, the students, the moms, even the skeptical independents in the back. One woman near the stage wiped a tear. A man in a veteran's hat gave a slow, approving nod. Twitter was already ablaze. Karoline Leavitt is cutting through the noise like a laser. Real talk. Crockett is spiraling, and Karoline just stood in the fire and didn't blink. This isn't politics, this is surgery. Jasmine tried again, flailing. You know what? This is exactly what I expected. Another Republican playing victim while pushing dangerous rhetoric. You'll always act like being asked questions is an attack. Karoline's voice cut in, calm and lethal. No, Jasmine. I welcome questions. I love debate. What I don't tolerate is condescension masquerading as conviction. Because what you're really mad about is that I knew my stuff and you didn't. Oof. The moderator couldn't hide his grin this time. The audience cracked with light applause that quickly swelled into something louder. Karoline continued, and now speaking directly to the cameras. Americans are smart. They see through theatrics. They know when someone's faking outrage to hide from responsibility. And tonight, they saw it live. And then, with the slightest smirk, you tried to outshout me. But you forgot. This isn't a volume contest. It's a credibility test. Standing ovation. Jasmine, clearly rattled, threw her hands up. Y'all go ahead and clap for her. We'll see how many of you still feel that way when rights are rolled back and billionaires are writing your laws. But her voice was drowned out, not by jeers but by applause. A TikTok clip of Karoline's credibility test line hit 1 million views within 30 minutes. Someone in the crowd held up a sign. She brought facts, not feelings, and as Karoline stood there, back straight, chin lifted, a quiet resolve painted her expression. She wasn't here to score points. She was here to expose the game. But the final moment of truth was still to come. The tension was thick enough to slice. Jasmine Crockett stood at her podium like a boxer on the ropes, eyes flaring, jaw tight, mic hot. Her earlier poise had crumbled. The crowd had turned. Her viral moment. Gone, replaced by trending hashtags, like Karoline Clapback and Crockett collapse. And yet she wasn't ready to concede. Not yet. You know what? She snapped, gripping her mic like it owed her an apology. This whole debate is a joke. None of this matters. It's just a bunch of rehearsed lines and clickbait clips. Real people don't care about who scored points. They care about surviving. The moderator raised an eyebrow. The audience went still. Jasmine pushed further, her voice cracking as she leaned into full deflection. Go ahead. Clap for Karoline. Celebrate your little gotcha moments. Meanwhile, black mothers can't afford groceries, schools are underfunded, and we're sitting here debating who looked smarter on stage. That's pathetic. She paced. Now she wasn't talking to the audience. She was ranting at it. This system is broken, and you're all cheering for the person who's going to uphold it. Congrats, hope the views were worth it. It was the political equivalent of flipping the table. Silence. The kind of silence that's louder than shouting. And that's when Karoline stepped forward. No smirk, no smugness, just something sharper, like resolve distilled into speech. You're right about one thing, Congresswoman, Karoline began, her voice lower now, laced with gravity. Real people are struggling, the system is broken, but what you just did was weaponize pain to avoid accountability. The audience held its breath. Karoline moved closer to the center of the stage, commanding the spotlight not by force but by presence. When you realized your arguments didn't hold up, you changed the rules. You turned this into a pity contest. You dismissed truth as theatrics and replaced facts with emotion. Her tone sharpened, not angry, but precise. But the truth doesn't stop mattering just because it's inconvenient. Then, like a scalpel to the heart of the debate, you talk about black mothers struggling. So let's talk about the black mother who messaged me last week. The room perked up. Jasmine blinked. She said her 12-year-old son reads every bill I support, not because I'm perfect, but because he's tired of being pandered to. He wants honesty. He wants substance. He wants someone who doesn't use his skin color as a shield to dodge hard questions. A collective inhale spread through the audience. That boy doesn't need a savior. He needs a leader. Now the mic was more than a prop. It was a sword. You say this debate doesn't matter. Tell that to the small business owner drowning in red tape. Tell that to the veteran who got censored online for sharing his wartime experience. Tell it to the college student who's scared to speak up because someone like you might call them a racist for asking a question. Karoline's eyes locked onto Jasmine's. Don't confuse noise with power, Congresswoman. This is power, the power to speak uncomfortable truths and still stand tall. And then the final blow. Because in the end, leadership isn't about being loud, it's about being right. And tonight, the facts weren't on your side. Boom! There it was. The kind of moment that stops time. No dramatic music, no flashy effects, just raw, irrefutable truth. Jasmine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The crowd erupted standing ovation. People shot out of their seats, phones went up, applause rained like thunder. Even the moderator stepped back, clearly stunned. A chant started near the back. Karoline! 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 The internet detonated. She didn't just win the debate, she buried it. Caused a mic drop. Jasmine Crockett just got fact-checked into oblivion. Karoline Leavitt is the future, period. On stage, Jasmine took a shaky step back, for the first time all night, and she looked small. And Karoline? She didn't gloat. She didn't point. She didn't need to. She just stood there, hands at her sides, face calm, like a warrior who knew the war was already over. And that's when the real shock came next. Jasmine Crockett didn't storm out. She didn't throw her mic, didn't shout, didn't beg for the last word. She simply stood there, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped, like a fire that had run out of oxygen. For a fleeting moment, there was something almost tragic about it, because despite all her bluster, all her fire and fury, the truth had exposed something deeper. She wasn't prepared to defend her own narrative once it was stripped of applause lines and buzzwords. With a faint nod to the moderator, Jasmine walked off stage, swallowed by the shadows of the wings, her heels echoing against the now silent floor. She didn't look back. And just like that, the loudest voice in the room disappeared into irrelevance. The spotlight, now unchallenged, turned toward Karoline Leavitt, still standing firm, unmoved, eyes level with the crowd. She didn't smile. She reflected. The room, half awe, half respect, went completely still. I didn't come here tonight to win a debate, she said softly, her voice echoing like a moral compass through the chamber. I came here because I believe something real is on the line. As she looked into the audience, her expression raw, human. Every time someone uses identity as armor instead of accountability, we all lose. Every time facts are dismissed as mean or irrelevant, we lose. Every time someone tries to shame you into silence, we all lose. She paused, her voice tightening with emotion. I've been underestimated, mocked, dismissed, not because I lack the facts, but because I dare to speak them plainly. But tonight wasn't about me. It was about a principle. She stepped forward one last time. In the end, intelligence, merit, and truth always rise above arrogance and manipulation. The words landed like a hammer of justice. Somewhere in the front row, an older veteran wiped a tear from his eye. A college student whispered, "She just said everything I've wanted to say but was too scared to." And then a roar of applause, not just polite claps. Her standing, shaking, soul-deep ovation. It wasn't just victory, it was vindication. And online, the digital world exploded. Karoline Leavitt didn't debate, she delivered a masterclass in truth. That closing speech should be shown in every high school civics class. We just witnessed the future of conservative leadership, but perhaps the most viral comment of the night came from an unexpected source. I may not agree with her politics, but Karoline earned my respect tonight. That's what real leadership looks like. Our Justice for All, a well-known liberal-leaning influencer. The video hit 2 million views in under 12 hours. Clips were turned into TikToks. News anchors replayed the final speech on loop. Hashtags like Leavitt leadership and the truth over tricks surged. And Karoline, she walked off that stage with more than applause. She walked off carrying the weight and honor out of something bigger. She had reminded America what courage actually sounds like. So now we turn to you. Do you think justice was served? Should more debates focus on truth over theatrics? If you believe in courage over cancel culture and facts over feelings, share this video. Post it. Repost it. Let the world know we're not staying silent anymore. Subscribe for more showdowns that expose hypocrisy and elevate truth, because if no one else will say it, we will.